When Amelia Morgan stepped into the sleek, glass-walled office building that brisk autumn evening, she carried more than just a lovingly packed dinner. She carried hope, excitement, and the gentle stirrings of new life in her belly. Each footstep echoed with resolve, a testament to her devotion to her husband, James. But never could she have imagined the dark secret hidden behind those polished doors. As she approached the office suite, Amelia's heart pounded with anticipation, unaware that everything she believed about her marriage was about to unravel. Little did she know the next few minutes would change her life forever. Amelia Morgan had always believed that love was meant to endure, no matter the challenges. She and James met in their junior year of college at the University of Chicago, where he studied finance, and she pursued a degree in journalism. From the outset, they appeared to complement each other perfectly. Amelia's vivacious yet compassionate spirit balanced James's ambitious and studious nature. When they married 3 years after graduation, many who attended the wedding commented that theirs was a union blessed by the heavens themselves. Over the years, Amelia watched James climb the corporate ladder at Highland & Brown Investment Group, heading to the office early and coming home late. His dedication eventually landed him the position of Chief Financial Strategist, an impressive title to be sure, but one that demanded an almost unimaginable level of commitment. While James was consumed with stock markets, client meetings, and late-night deadlines, Amelia turned to freelance journalism. She penned human interest stories, many of which got published in local newspapers like the Chicago Tribune. She didn't mind that her husband was busy. She took pride in being the supportive partner. Besides, she had her writing her circle of friends and a strong sense of independence. Their bond only grew stronger when Amelia found out she was pregnant. They had talked about having children in the future, but neither expected it to happen so soon. Still, James was overjoyed, or at least that was what he showed on the outside. He doted on Amelia in the early months, rearranging his work schedule to attend prenatal checkups and even reading parenting books at night. As Amelia's belly grew, so did her affection for James. She felt ready to evolve from just being his wife and confidant into the nurturing mother of his child. She believed their marriage would become even more solid and grounded. It never crossed her mind to doubt James's faithfulness. In the background, though, certain subtle changes took root. James started receiving an unusual number of late-night calls, which he would answer in hushed tones. He began taking business trips on short notice. More nights than not, James returned home after Amelia was asleep, offering half-baked excuses about urgent crises at work. Amelia, trusting by nature, didn't probe too deeply. She was busy writing an expansive piece for Chicago Monthly about local heroes making a difference in their communities. Then came the day she decided on a whim to surprise James with a home-cooked dinner at his office. She wanted to nourish him with both warmth and homemade goodness, to remind him that even in the chaos of corporate life, love awaited him. Late October's chilly wind greeted Amelia as she left their suburban home. With one hand resting protectively over her belly and the other clutching a thermal bag of steaming lasagna, she navigated her car toward the downtown area. The city lights twinkled in the distance like scattered stars that had fallen to earth. Amelia felt a gentle wave of hopefulness wash over her. She couldn't wait to see James's surprised, grateful expression when she showed up. After all, it was her thoughtful gestures that had drawn him to her back in college. A subdued sense of unease grew in her, though a product of the recent changes in his behavior. She scolded herself for being paranoid. James was a devoted man who had never given her any genuine reason to doubt him. Instead, she forced herself to think about the little fluttery movements of the baby inside her. She hummed softly to calm her nerves. A baby was on the way, and love needed to be at the forefront of her thoughts. Even so, a faint recollection surfaced. 2 nights prior, James had come home past midnight, reeking of expensive perfume that Amelia didn't recognize. She wanted to ask him about it, but he had immediately jumped into the shower, explaining that he and a colleague had spent the evening at a fancy restaurant with a client. She remembered hugging him afterwards and feeling a subtle distance, something intangible yet real, pushing those doubts aside yet again. Amelia parked her car in the visitors section of the underground lot, carefully grabbed the food and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her cheeks were flushed from the walk in the cold, and her dark hair was slightly tousled. She smoothed down her coat, patted her bump, and took the elevator to the 26th floor. The reception area was surprisingly quiet for an early evening, with only a few lights illuminating the corridors. A new security guard, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Victor, glanced up and offered Amelia a polite smile when she walked past the lobby's main desk. She recognized him from a few earlier visits, but didn't know him well. He didn't try to stop her. He simply made a note of her arrival in the guest log. Amelia nodded in gratitude and continued noticing that none of James's usual co-workers seemed to be around. Highland and Brown Investment Group occupied 2 floors. The 26th floor housed the open-concept bullpen where mid-level analysts worked. The executive offices, including James's, were located a floor above. It was unusual not to see anyone else still working. Their departmental culture prized late-night research and all-hours deal-making. The hush unsettled her. She wondered if James had told everyone to leave early, or if there was a big off-site function tonight that she wasn't aware of. Perhaps James was all alone grappling with a final project or going over the numbers for a morning presentation. Amelia inhaled and reminded herself, "He's going to be thrilled when he sees you." Adjusting her grip on the thermal bag, Amelia took the elevator to the 27th floor. The doors opened to a corridor with marble floors, reflecting the gentle glow of track lighting. She walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing. Each stride seemed to amplify her heartbeat until she was standing before the glass door, emblazoned with James's name, James Morgan, Chief Financial Strategist. She took another breath, steeling herself. The door was slightly ajar. That was odd. James usually locked it when he worked late to maintain privacy. She could hear muffled voices inside, though one voice in particular caught her attention, a woman's voice. Amelia's lips parted as a strange mixture of confusion and dread spread through her chest. Surely there had to be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps a co-worker was helping him with a last-minute project. Mustering her composure, Amelia turned the knob and walked in. Inside the office, the overhead lights were dimmed, replaced by the subtle glow of a floor lamp beside James's polished mahogany desk. Documents and binders were strewn across the surface. The smell of rose-scented perfume hit Amelia's nostrils. She froze for an instant, her eyes landing on a woman seated in the black leather executive chair. James's chair, which Amelia herself had gifted him on his birthday 2 years ago. The woman's presence was startling enough, but what made Amelia's heart lurch was the detail of her attire. She wore an emerald silk blouse and a form-fitting charcoal skirt that looked exactly like the set Amelia had hung in their bedroom closet a week ago, freshly laundered. Amelia felt rooted to the spot, her mind unable to process the betrayal playing out in front of her. Behind the woman stood James, one hand resting on her shoulder. His tie was undone shirt, partially unbuttoned, as though he'd hurried to dress just before Amelia walked in. He wore an expression of sheer panic eyes, darting between his pregnant wife and the woman in the chair. The lady turned around slowly, meeting Amelia's gaze with a smug, almost defiant air. Her name, as Amelia would soon learn, was Isabelle Reed, a newly hired financial researcher who had become far more than just a co-worker to James. In that instant, Amelia's entire body quivered with shock and heartbreak. The thermal bag slipped from her grasp, falling to the floor with a muffled thud. It seemed symbolic, the shattering of her illusions about their marriage. Her lips formed a silent question. She couldn't bring herself to speak aloud. Her eyes darted to James, seeking an explanation, a denial, anything. James's face pale as moonlight seemed to register the catastrophic impact of the scene. He stammered her name, Amelia, as though that single word could rectify everything. Isabelle rose with languid grace, letting Amelia's eyes wander over the outfit, Amelia's outfit, that the other woman wore so brazenly. James attempted to step forward, arms outstretched. Amelia instinctively recoiled, tears stinging her eyes. Her confusion morphed into fury. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice trembling with outrage. In an almost laughable cliché, James stammered, "It's not what it looks like." The statement seemed so ridiculous that Amelia nearly let out a bitter laugh. She could see perfectly well what it was. It was betrayal, cunning, and heartbreak, all condensed into this humiliating tableau. She might have dismissed suspicious signs before, but now there was no denying the reality. James's pregnant wife and the mistress in her clothes with the husband standing between them. This was no misunderstanding. Isabelle, coldly elegant, even in that stolen blouse, leaned against the desk regarding Amelia through half-lidded eyes. "James," she said, her tone as smooth as glass. "I think it's time to tell her the truth." The audacity in her voice, the apparent lack of shame, sent a jolt through Amelia's core. Focusing on James, Amelia saw the glimmer of tears welling in his eyes. He reached a trembling hand toward her. "Amelia, listen," he pleaded, sounding on the verge of breaking. "I never meant for things to go this far." "What does that mean?" Amelia shot back. "How long has this been happening?" Isabelle answered before James could. "About 6 months, give or take." Her response seemed deliberately pointed. Amelia's eyes flashed with rage, and she turned to James, expecting him to deny it. But James's gaze dropped to the floor, confirming Isabelle's statement. 6 months. That meant James had been unfaithful almost from the beginning of Amelia's pregnancy. A wave of nausea overwhelmed Amelia, and she gripped the edge of the doorframe to steady herself. She felt an immediate protective instinct for the child inside her. James tried to close the distance between them, voice choking with desperation. "It was just a mistake. We had a couple of late nights at the office, and I was under a lot of stress. Isabelle was there for me." He stumbled over his words as though he realized how empty they sounded. Amelia stared in disbelief, tears gathering in her eyes. "A mistake you've been repeating for half a year," she replied, voice trembling. "And you had the nerve to let her wear my clothes." James looked equally ashamed and panicked, seemingly at a loss for words. Isabelle took it upon herself to speak again. "We didn't think you'd come here. James told me you were busy at home." Isabelle's statement dripped with arrogance, as though Amelia's presence was the real inconvenience. At that moment, Amelia's entire body screamed for flight or confrontation. Her heart hammered. Her mind reeled, and she realized with heartbreaking clarity that the life she had envisioned was never as secure as she believed. Still with a baby on the way, She knew she couldn't afford to collapse. Summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, Amelia steadied herself. She shot James a withering glare before locking eyes with Isabelle. "You can keep the clothes," she said, her voice quivering. "They're ruined to me now." Amelia left the office in a rush, tears burning hot tracks down her cheeks. She fumbled with the elevator buttons, nearly dropping her phone as she tried to call a cab, her car keys trembling in her hand. Before she could even step inside the elevator, James sprinted out after her, calling her name repeatedly. She refused to turn around. In her mind, every step away from him felt like a measure of self-preservation. When she reached the underground parking lot, James was still trailing behind her, panting and breathless. "Amelia, wait. Please, we can talk this out." She spun, tears streaking her face. "Talk, I saw everything, James. What's left to discuss? You betrayed me, and our baby." She cupped her belly protectively. Her voice nearly broke on that final word. He tried again, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I swear I'll end it. I'll do anything. Please let me explain." But Amelia had no room for explanations. She felt physically ill, humiliated, and deeply wounded. Shaking her head, she got into her car. Her hands trembled so violently that it took 2 tries to start the engine. James placed a hand on the window, his eyes rimmed with tears. She turned away and drove off into the night, leaving him a lonely silhouette in her rearview mirror. By the time she reached their suburban home, Amelia's eyes were raw from crying. Inside the darkened living room, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. She could almost feel the baby stirring in response to her turmoil, reminding her that life continued within her, despite the upheaval. Part of her wanted to call her best friend Lauren Brown from Glendale, someone who'd always been her confidant since their middle school days. But she felt too raw, too ashamed to speak the words, "James is cheating on me." Eventually, she summoned the courage to dial. Lauren picked up on the second ring, her voice filled with concern. Without waiting for formalities, Amelia let the story pour out in a broken torrent. James, the late nights, Isabelle's smug face, the stolen clothes. Lauren listened silently, and when Amelia finally paused, her friend spoke with a gentle but firm tone. "Get out of there, Amelia. You can't stay in that house alone with all these memories haunting you." "I can't just go." Amelia sniffled, wiping her nose with a tissue. "I'm pregnant." "Where would I go?" "You can stay with me," Lauren offered without hesitation. She lived about 2 hours away, but that distance might prove a safe haven. "Or if you want, I can come to you right now. You shouldn't be alone. This is too big to handle on your own, especially with the baby." Amelia, though grateful, hesitated. She wasn't sure of her next move. She just needed a night to think. "Let me see how I feel in the morning, okay?" she whispered. Lauren agreed to call again at sunrise, reminding Amelia that no matter what, she had a place to escape if she wanted it. Morning arrived all too soon, bringing with it a haze of heartache. A single ray of sunshine pierced through the partially drawn curtains of Amelia's bedroom. She stirred from a restless sleep, her pillow damp with tears. Her phone displayed multiple missed calls and texts, mostly from James. The first few messages were desperate apologies, peppered with declarations of love. Then came voice messages, some tearful, some pleading. Amelia listened to a single voicemail and found it too painful. In it, James's voice cracked as he begged her to come back, insisting that what happened was just a lapse in judgment. She deleted it midway. Lauren called promptly at 8 a.m. to check on her. Amelia's voice was steadier now, but her heart still felt as though it had been ripped in two. She had to decide on a course of action: stay in her marital home and face James' leave for a while to gather her thoughts, or move out entirely. Her phone beeped mid-call, a text from a number she didn't recognize. She glanced at it, and her heart pounded. "This is Isabelle. We need to talk. James is just as much to blame as I am. He didn't tell you everything. It's not my fault entirely." Trembling, Amelia ended the call with Lauren. She stared at the text. The nerve of Isabelle contacting her directly. Yet the message hinted there was more to the story than Amelia had witnessed last night. Did she even want to hear more? She decided to ignore Isabelle for now. Talking to her seemed like the last thing Amelia wanted. James showed up at the house around midday, letting himself in with his key. Amelia was in the kitchen, forcing down a glass of water and some toast to stave off nausea. The moment she heard the door open, her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to bolt upstairs to avoid him, but she steadied herself, deciding to stand her ground. He entered, looking ragged, unshaven eyes bloodshot, his usually neat hair in disarray. "Amelia." He spoke softly. "I'm so sorry." "Don't come near me," she warned, stepping back. The cold fury in her gaze made him stop in his tracks. "I don't want to hear your apologies. You violated my trust, James. You wore me down with excuses and lies. And now I discover you've been cheating for half a year. Why?" He exhaled, shoulders sagging. "I can't make excuses. I messed up badly." He sunk into a kitchen chair, burying his face in his hands. Slowly he lifted his head, tears staining his cheeks. "I never set out to betray you. It happened little by little, one late night at a time. I felt stressed, overwhelmed at work. Isabelle appeared as someone who understood, who listened." The tears in Amelia's eyes were replaced by hardened rage. "I listened to you. I was your wife, James. Do you realize the irony? I tried to support you, but you turned to another woman. Now you want me to comfort you because you feel guilty. It's more complicated than that," he mumbled, shaking his head. "You have to understand." "No, I don't." Amelia shouted, her voice echoing across the kitchen. She caught herself placing a protective hand on her stomach. The baby didn't need this stress. Lowering her voice, she added, "What else haven't you told me? Isabelle said you were hiding more." James paled at the mention of Isabelle's message. "She texted you?" he asked, voice quivering. Amelia only nodded curtly. James's eyes darted away in shame or fear. "I don't know what she told you, but whatever it is, it doesn't change how sorry I am." The conversation was draining. Amelia felt her head spinning. "I can't do this right now," she murmured. "I need space." His gaze latched onto her eyes, pleading. "Let me at least stay in the guest room. I can cook for you, help around the house. I don't want to leave you alone, especially with the baby." Amelia gave a mirthless laugh, tears welling anew. "You didn't think about the baby when you were with her. Don't pretend to care now." She took her coat from the rack and left the house, leaving James slumped in the kitchen. She needed air clarity, and perhaps a moment of solitude to keep herself from collapsing into a sobbing wreck. Instead of driving aimlessly, Amelia went to a small cafe near the local library, a place she often visited when searching for inspiration. The barista, a young man named Andy, recognized her and offered a friendly smile. She ordered chamomile tea, hoping it would soothe her frayed nerves. With her tea in hand, she settled into a cozy corner. The events of the past day blurred in her mind. Isabelle's smug face, James's tearful pleas, her own heartbreak. The baby shifted in her womb as if sensing her turmoil. She was about to cry when her phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You deserve to know. Meet me at the Brewster Lounge tonight, 7 p.m. This is bigger than just an affair. Trust me. Amelia stared at the message, heart racing. Was she truly going to meet Isabelle? The rational part of her screamed that this was insane. Yet the mention of this is bigger than just an affair. Intrigued her, stirring a sense of dread. She couldn't let James's mistress manipulate her. On the other hand, if there was more to learn, she deserved to know it. She typed a response. Fine. 7 p.m. The Brewster Lounge was an upscale bar perched on the 20th floor of a sleek high-rise, offering panoramic views of downtown Chicago's shimmering skyline. Amelia arrived 20 minutes early, her nerves in knots. She took a seat in one of the plush leather chairs near the window. The hostess offered a menu, but Amelia only asked for water with lemon, no appetite for anything else. At precisely 7 p.m., Isabelle Reed sauntered in, exuding polished confidence in a form-fitting black dress. Her hair was pinned up elegantly, accentuating her sharp cheekbones. The memory of seeing this woman in her own clothes made Amelia's stomach turn. Isabelle approached with a cool smirk sliding into the chair across from her. They locked eyes, tension crackling between them. You came, Isabelle said, her voice low, as though they were partners in a dangerous secret. Cut to the chase, Amelia responded, her tone icy. Why am I here? Isabelle flagged down a passing waiter, ordering a glass of Chardonnay for herself, before turning back to Amelia. Look, I know I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness. I want to lay out the facts because there's a lot you don't know about James, some skeletons he's been hiding. Amelia's anger flared, but also her curiosity. She leaned in. I don't believe you. James and I have been together for years. I know everything about him. Isabelle sipped her wine, eyes glittering. You know the man he wants you to see. But there's more. Ask him about the Hathaway scandal. Ask him why he really got promoted so quickly at Highland and Brown. Amelia frowned. The Hathaway scandal was a well-known fiasco in Chicago's corporate world, involving a construction magnate named Clint Hathaway, who allegedly bribed city officials. There was also talk of money laundering that had entangled a handful of bankers. Amelia remembered writing a short piece about it for the Chicago Tribune. What does James have to do with that? Isabelle raised an eyebrow. Let's just say he helped clean up some tricky financial files to keep certain people out of jail. That's where Highland and Brown recognized his value. He made a few big names owe him favors. The revelation struck Amelia like a jolt. James had never mentioned involvement in the Hathaway scandal. Could Isabelle be lying just to drive a wedge deeper? Yet her certainty had an unsettling ring of truth to it. Why should I believe you? Amelia said, voice slightly trembling. Isabelle took another languid sip of wine. I have documents, copies of the ones James hid. He never wanted them to see the light of day. But I kept backups for leverage. Her eyes flicked to Amelia's belly. He's probably not who you think. I'm not saying you owe me anything, but you deserve the entire truth before deciding what to do about your marriage. If you want the files, I can give them to you. A nauseous wave washed over Amelia. She swallowed hard, remembering James's panic and the nights he claimed to work so late at the office. The puzzle pieces were forming a darker picture of the man she loved. She stared at Isabelle, who seemed to relish her power in this moment. "Why do you care if I know all of this? What's your angle?" Isabelle's expression softened slightly. "James told me he'd leave you, but he never did. Then I found out you were pregnant, and he kept insisting it was a complication. I realized he wasn't going to fulfill his promises, so I want to burn down the fantasy he's living. If I can't have him, maybe I'll ruin him." Amelia felt revulsion for this woman, but also a grim fascination. This was more than a simple affair. It was a twisted web of blackmail power plays and half-truths. Suddenly, the baby kicked, as if urging Amelia to leave this toxic environment. "Send me the documents," Amelia finally said, not bothering to hide her disgust. She jotted down a burner email address she sometimes used for investigative journalism. "Use this." Isabelle smirked carefully, pocketing the slip of paper. "By morning, you'll have them." She stood and smoothed her dress. "Just remember, James is a master at deception. If you think you know him, you're mistaken." With that, she left, leaving Amelia alone with a mind reeling from the horrifying possibilities. Amelia returned home around 9, physically exhausted and emotionally drained. James was waiting in the living room, pacing. When she entered, he rushed to her side. "Where were you?" "I was worried sick." She brushed past him, refusing to let him touch her. "Meeting Isabelle," she said, tersely removing her coat. She watched his face go ashen. "She told me something about the Hathaway scandal." James's face crumpled. He dropped onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "I was afraid she'd drag that into this," he mumbled. "It was a long time ago, Amelia. It was just one job. I had no idea how deep it went until it was too late." Her voice trembled with fury. "You never told me. You never even hinted. You were complicit in that fiasco. Do you realize people went to prison and you just walked away scot-free?" He sighed heavily, tears threatening to spill again. "I didn't launder money or anything. I was asked to restructure some accounts. I realized later it was hush money. Then Highland and Brown quietly promoted me because I kept my mouth shut. I was too scared and ambitious to blow the whistle. I rationalized it, telling myself I was protecting us." Amelia's mouth fell open in disbelief. "Protecting us? By getting tangled in illegal schemes? How am I supposed to trust a word you say now? You cheated on me for 6 months. You withheld your involvement in a huge scandal. What else is there?" James sprang up, reaching for her hands. She pulled away. He looked devastated. "Nothing else," he pleaded. "That's the whole story." She narrowed her eyes, remembering Isabelle's warning that James was a master of deception. "I want you out," she said, her voice cold. "I need time to figure out what to do next. But I can't do it with you here lying to my face." James shook his head, panic lighting his eyes. "I won't leave you alone. You're pregnant. I want to be here for you. Now you want to be here." She scoffed. "Were you thinking about being there when you had your mistress draped in my clothes? Don't talk to me about caring. You lost that privilege. Take a hotel for a few nights. I'll let you know when or if you can come back." He protested, but Amelia's determined rage was a force he couldn't overcome. Eventually, he packed a small bag, tears staining his face, and left. When the door clicked shut, Amelia exhaled shakily, fighting a fresh wave of tears. She hadn't felt so alone in years. The next morning, Amelia woke to find multiple emails in her burner account from Isabelle Reed. The subject line read, "The truth about James." She opened them with trembling fingers. Attached were dozens of PDF files, bank statements, incriminating correspondences, transactional records with suspicious transfers. Amelia's stomach twisted. It confirmed James had indeed been embroiled in the Hathaway scandal, albeit in a covert manner. Some emails even suggested James was aware that the money originated from illegal bribes. Reading through them, Amelia felt her faith in James unravel even further. He was not just an unfaithful husband, but also a man capable of playing a dangerous game in the corporate underbelly. Fear sprouted within her, fear for her future and for the babies. She also discovered a thread of messages between James and Isabelle, spanning months. In them, James wrote about his frustrations with domestic life, blaming Amelia for being too focused on the pregnancy. He vented that he felt caged. It was a vile betrayal of what she had believed to be a loving relationship. Every word cut like a knife. The final email from Isabelle read, "You see now. He doesn't deserve either of us. Do what you will with this information. I'm done." Numb. Amelia closed the laptop. The one person who might help her make sense of this chaos was Lauren. She quickly called her friend, voice shaky, as she recounted the new revelations. Lauren, furious on Amelia's behalf, insisted she move out for a while, at least until she decided what to do long term. After all, James had the money and resources to manipulate situations to his advantage. Amelia resisted, initially reluctant to leave behind the home she had worked so hard to build. But the weight of betrayal and uncertainty regarding her safety, emotionally and maybe even legally, convinced her to accept Lauren's offer. That afternoon, Amelia packed a few clothes, her laptop, and some essentials for prenatal care. She left a note for James, short and stern, "I need time and space. Do not contact me unless it's an emergency." She hopped into her car and began the 2-hour drive to Glendale, where Lauren lived. The road ahead felt symbolic of her internal journey, a path out of the life she once cherished and into an uncertain future. Arriving at Lauren's cozy bungalow, Amelia felt the weight on her chest ease a fraction. Lauren greeted her at the door with a warm, tight hug. "I'm here for you no matter what," she whispered, leading Amelia inside. The next few days passed in a blur of tears, anger, and heartache. Lauren proved to be a patient listener, letting Amelia cry it out multiple times a day. By the third day, Amelia finally mustered enough emotional energy to call her obstetrician, Dr. Victoria Lawson from Brooklyn, now practicing in Chicago, to explain the recent stress in her life. Dr. Lawson was sympathetic, advising her to prioritize her emotional well-being for the baby's sake. She offered to connect Amelia with a therapist who specialized in prenatal and postpartum mental health. Amelia agreed, feeling that maybe a professional could help her navigate this crisis. While at Lauren's, Amelia received daily calls from James, which she ignored except for one brief conversation. During that call, James apologized over and over, but offered no real solutions or acceptance of blame beyond, "I messed up." Amelia was done listening to half-hearted admissions. She hung up and refused to answer his calls thereafter. In the meantime, she contemplated her future. Could she raise the baby alone? Did she have the financial means to do so, considering that James was the primary breadwinner? As a freelance journalist, Amelia had some savings, but it wasn't substantial. She reached out to her older brother, Kyle Donovan, a private accountant in Minneapolis, for advice. After hearing the story, Kyle recommended a good divorce attorney if it came to that. He also cautioned her about the potential legal fallout from James's ties to the Hathaway scandal. If James's part in it is exposed, it might affect your assets and finances too, Kyle warned. Amelia felt her world tilt further. Should she keep quiet and try to preserve James's job for the sake of child support? Or should she blow the whistle to free herself from complicity in his crimes? Each option felt morally and practically complex. About a week into her stay at Lauren's, Amelia got a knock on the door. Lauren opened it to find James on the porch, a disheveled wreck. Despite Amelia's explicit instructions, he had tracked her down. "I just need to see her," James' pleaded voice cracking. Lauren, arms crossed, stated icily, "She doesn't want to talk to you." She began to close the door, but Amelia appeared behind her friend, recognizing that she couldn't avoid James forever. Stepping onto the porch, she quietly asked Lauren to give them a moment alone. Lauren shot her a concerned look, but reluctantly complied, leaving them on the doorstep. James looked at Amelia with sorrow-filled eyes. "I've been going crazy without you," he confessed. "I miss you and I'm terrified I've lost you for good." She stared at him, unsure if she felt pity-anger or a complicated mixture of both. "I told you not to come," she said, softly but firmly. "I had to," he insisted, voice trembling. "I want to come clean, fully. Please, Amelia, give me a chance to explain everything." Amelia sighed. A part of her hated him. Yet another part remembered the early days of their love, the kind, thoughtful man he once seemed to be. She gestured toward a bench on the porch, and they sat down, a rigid distance between them. Haltingly, James confessed to how his affair with Isabelle began. He admitted the relationship was initially physical, but soon became entangled in corporate secrets and blackmail. Isabelle discovered the Hathaway documents, threatening to expose him if he didn't continue seeing her. Rather than risk losing his career and going to prison, James felt trapped, though. Amelia wondered if it was just an excuse. He recounted multiple near breakups with Isabelle, but she always pulled him back with a new threat. At some point, the lines blurred between blackmail and genuine attraction, and he found himself seeking her company for comfort. Amelia listened in stunned silence. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. "So you stayed with her because she was blackmailing you, and at the same time because you liked it," she said, voice dripping with bitterness. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I was weak. I was selfish. But you have to know I love you. I love our baby. I swear on my life I'll do anything to fix this." She closed her eyes, tears forming. "You can't fix what you destroyed so easily. I can't even look at you without remembering all the lies. And now I'm caught in the middle of your corporate crimes and your mistress's threats. Do you have any idea how unsafe I feel?" James nodded again, choking out. "I'll turn myself in. I'll confess everything. I just want you to feel safe. I'm willing to accept any punishment to have a chance with you and our child." Her eyes snapped open. She studied him carefully. Was he truly ready to risk it all just to make amends? Part of her found it hard to believe. Yet the raw desperation in his voice was compelling. "Let me think," Amelia finally said. "I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. We'll see what happens." James started to protest, but she rose abruptly, cutting the conversation short. "Go home, James. You've done enough for one day." The next day, Amelia sat in a modest legal office with an attorney named Julia Thompson from Redwood City, who had a stellar reputation for handling high-conflict divorces and white-collar entanglements. Lauren accompanied her as moral support, sitting quietly in the waiting area. Amelia felt her nerves fray at the edges as she recounted James's infidelity, the Hathaway documents, and Isabelle's blackmail. Julia listened intently, tapping notes into her laptop. After Amelia finished, Julia leaned back in her chair, lacing her fingers. "Your situation is complicated," she began, "but not without options. First, regarding the affair, that's grounds for a fault-based divorce in some states, but in Illinois, adultery doesn't necessarily grant a better settlement. However, it can influence spousal maintenance and custody decisions if there's evidence of harm or neglect." Amelia nodded, her stomach twisting. She dreaded the idea of custody battles, especially when the baby wasn't even born yet. As for the Hathaway scandal, Julia continued, "The risk is that if James is prosecuted, you may be under scrutiny too simply by virtue of being married. However, if you have no direct involvement, and we can prove you didn't benefit from his illegal activities other than standard living expenses, you had no reason to question you should be safe legally. Your bigger challenge is whether James's issues put your financial stability in jeopardy." Amelia swallowed hard. "What do you recommend?" Julia paused, choosing her words. "If you decide to divorce, we can file an immediate petition that includes spousal support and later child support. The court can freeze certain marital assets pending the resolution of James's legal situation. But if you think there's a chance of reconciliation, I suggest a post-nuptial agreement. It would protect you and your child from any legal and financial fallout. James would need to sign it willingly, effectively, separating your finances from any potential liabilities he faces." The notion of a post-nuptial agreement was new to Amelia. She mulled over it, exhaling a heavy breath. "I never wanted to handle my marriage like a business transaction," she whispered, tears gathering. Julia reached out a sympathetic hand. "I understand. But in crises like this, it's prudent to protect yourself and your child." That night, alone in the guest room at Lauren's house, Amelia couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling fan, spinning overhead, replaying Julia's advice. Divorce felt so final, so crushing, especially with a child involved. Could she truly imagine a future without James? But how could she stay married to a man who had lied so profoundly, who had found comfort in another woman's arms? Even if she found it in her heart to forgive, would the trust ever be the same? Then there was the matter of moral duty. Exposing James meant potentially saving others from corporate corruption. Yet that same act would jeopardize any child support or financial stability. It might even land James in jail. Was she willing to do that? Did she owe him any loyalty after what he'd done? She found herself sobbing again, feeling the baby kick. Softly she murmured to the child, "I'm sorry you have to go through this. I wish I could protect you from all of it." Eventually, she fell into a fitful sleep, haunted by nightmares of Isabelle's smug grin and James's tear-streaked confessions. The following morning, Amelia called James, instructing him to meet her at a quiet lakeside park near Glendale. Surrounded by gentle waves and morning joggers, they sat down on a wooden bench. The crisp air carried the scent of pine. "I spoke to a lawyer," Amelia said, skipping pleasantries. "I have 2 conditions if there's any hope for us. 1, you sign a post-nuptial agreement that shields me and our child from any legal or financial fallout of your crimes. 2, you must turn yourself in or cooperate with the authorities regarding the Hathaway scandal. No more secrets." James's face tensed at her words. He chewed his lip anxiously before nodding. "I'll sign whatever you want. You have my word." His hands trembled, though, when he got to the second demand. "But do I really have to cooperate with the authorities?" Don't you realize what that could mean for me? For us? Amelia's expression hardened. You put your job and your reputation above our marriage for months. Now I'm putting our child's future and safety first. I refuse to be tied down by your deceit. The only path forward, if any, is total honesty. James looked as if he'd aged 10 years overnight. After a long pause, he nodded. All right, he whispered. I'll do it. I'll speak to the authorities. But you have to promise me something in return. If I do this, give me a chance to be a father to our child. Don't cut me out of their life. Amelia felt tears blur her vision. That depends on you, she said softly. How you handle yourself from this point forward will determine your role in our child's life. With that, she rose from the bench, leaving him with a swirling mixture of fear, hope, and desperation on his face. True to his word, James signed the post-nuptial agreement Julia Thompson prepared. A notary stamped it, and Amelia felt a rush of both relief and sadness. This was not how she ever imagined her marriage evolving, fortified by legal walls that separated her future from her husband's potential downfall. Within days, James arranged a confidential meeting with a federal investigator. Under counsel from his own attorney, James confessed his role in the Hathaway scandal. He provided the incriminating documents he had, though Isabelle's additional files had already been stealthily uploaded onto a secure server at a news outlet. Amelia, having a journalist's instinct, had forwarded them anonymously to a contact at the Chicago Tribune, just in case James backtracked. James's confession triggered a quiet but intense investigation. Amelia was questioned briefly, but her minor involvement was deemed non-criminal. She felt relief tinged with heartbreak as she watched James step onto a precarious legal path that could end with his arrest. Weeks turned into months as the investigation churned on. Amelia remained with Lauren, although she occasionally allowed James to accompany her to doctor's appointments. She couldn't deny the child deserved a father. Moreover, James appeared contrite and determined to be present for the pregnancy. His legal case remained in limbo. He was out on bond, awaiting potential charges or a plea deal. Publicly, Highland and Brown placed him on administrative leave. Privately, they prepared to distance themselves from him if charges were filed. Despite the chaos, the day of Amelia's delivery arrived in a swirl of contractions and hospital corridors. James was there, racked with anxiety, but quietly supportive. Lauren stood by, too, holding Amelia's hand. After an arduous labor, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Oliver Morgan. The rush of maternal love overcame her tears streaming down her face as she held Oliver's tiny form against her chest. James hovered nearby, tears filling his eyes. For a moment, all the betrayal and secrets receded, replaced by the profound miracle of new life. Amelia watched him gently stroke the baby's cheek. She saw real love in his gaze, a tenderness that momentarily eclipsed her anger. Yet reality was never far behind. Over the next days, while Amelia recovered at Lauren's place with Oliver, James faced an onslaught of legal proceedings. The news broke about his involvement in the Hathaway scandal, causing a minor media sensation. James felt as though he was living on borrowed time, waiting for a final ruling. Isabelle ironically seemed to vanish from the scene. Rumor had it she took a position at a different firm on the East Coast. The baby steps James took toward redemption were overshadowed by the looming threat of prison. 3 months after Oliver's birth, James reached a plea bargain with the authorities. His cooperation led to the exposure of bigger players in the scandal, and in exchange, James received a reduced sentence of supervised probation and substantial financial penalties. He avoided jail, but his career was effectively over, and his professional reputation was in tatters. During this time, Amelia remained cautious. The postnup protected her and Oliver from James's financial liabilities. She let James see the baby regularly, but she declined to move back in with him. She needed to see whether he could truly rebuild his life and earn her trust. Slowly, he took a lower-level accounting job in a small firm living in a modest apartment, dedicating any spare time to Oliver. His affair with Isabelle was now just a stain on his conscience, a memory that haunted him. Over the following year, James proved consistent. He attended counseling, both individually and with Amelia, who agreed to couples therapy only because it might benefit Oliver to have two parents who at least communicated. Day by day, the bitter anger in Amelia's heart thawed into cautious acceptance. She never forgot the sight of Isabelle in her chair wearing her clothes. She never completely forgave the lies or the humiliation. But she saw genuine remorse and the man's desire to be a father. Ultimately, whether Amelia and James would fully reconcile remained uncertain, even as Oliver celebrated his first birthday. Yet one thing was clear: the illusions that once defined their marriage had crumbled, replaced by a raw understanding of each other's flaws. Their story was no longer a fairy tale, but neither was it wholly tragic. Life has always marched forward, full of complexities and second chances or final goodbyes. For Amelia, in those rare, quiet moments, she'd cradle Oliver and reflect on everything that had transpired. She'd recall that fateful night she brought dinner to James's office and found a mistress sitting in her place wearing her clothes. It was the moment that shattered her world, and ironically the moment that pushed her to find her own inner strength. She didn't know if she and James could ever rebuild their relationship from the ashes. Yet she did know one thing: she had emerged from the storm stronger, with a fierce determination to protect herself and her child. And that at least was a victory she could hold on to. Thank you for joining me on this emotional roller coaster of betrayal, blackmail, and unexpected resilience. Amelia's story reminds us that sometimes the deepest betrayals can become the crucible for our greatest growth. Despite her heartbreak, she found courage to stand up for herself, protect her child, and walk a path toward healing, even if it meant sacrificing the fantasy of a perfect marriage. Life rarely fits into neat little boxes, and neither do our relationships. Yet hope can still blossom in the ruins of trust, showing us that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. If you found this dramatic journey compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Help me bring more stories like Amelia's to life stories of love, loss, and the powerful will to overcome. Your support makes it all possible. Until next time, stay strong and keep believing in second chances. $1 million mansion, a glittering charity gala, and a rumor that shattered her world. These were the moments that changed Veronica Caldwell's life forever. The night she glimpsed her millionaire husband, Arthur Caldwell, in a corner suite with another woman, her heart stopped and her reality came undone. But Veronica wasn't one to wilt under heartbreak. In a blaze of fury and determination, she demanded answers. Within hours, she'd contacted high-profile attorney Lisa Bloom, filed a lawsuit, and sought to freeze Arthur's assets. Little did she know this was only the beginning. Betrayal, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations lay just beyond the door. Veronica Caldwell had been raised with modest means in a small Midwest town called Havenwood. When she first met Arthur, it was during a charity event at the luxurious Blackwell Hotel in downtown Chicago, where she had been working as an event organizer. He introduced himself with a gentle smile and impeccable charm, claiming to be a philanthropist looking to support children's healthcare initiatives. Veronica was drawn to his warmth and what appeared to be genuine kindness. Arthur was a man with an understated confidence and a magnetic presence that commanded the room. After weeks of casual dates, mostly at public places like art galleries, fancy brunch spots, and one memorable evening at the Chicago Symphony, Veronica found herself swept into Arthur's extravagant world. Diamonds, fine wines, designer gowns. These were all new to her. Yet, despite the sudden wealth and whirlwind romance, Arthur always seemed open and attentive, making her feel truly seen. But those early days were a stark contrast to what Veronica discovered that fateful evening at the Caldwell mansion. The estate, perched on 10 acres just outside the city, boasted a lush garden, a private lake, and a breathtaking view of the skyline. Arthur often hosted lavish fundraisers there, inviting everyone from local politicians to Hollywood celebrities. At one such event, Veronica, now Mrs. Caldwell for nearly 3 years, noticed her husband had slipped away from the main gathering. When he didn't return, she went searching. She passed the rose garden, circled around the pool house, and eventually found herself outside the upstairs study. A strange giggle echoed through the hallway. With her hand trembling on the doorknob, she peeked inside. There, under the glow of a crystal chandelier, Arthur's arms were intimately wrapped around a woman Veronica had never seen before. Her world cracked in an instant. In that moment, Veronica felt her entire body go numb. She wanted to burst through the door, confront them both, and demand answers. But something stopped her. Instead, she crept backward, heart-hammering tears stinging her eyes, until she found her way back downstairs. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. Throughout the rest of the evening, she maintained her composure with an otherworldly grace she never knew she possessed. She greeted guests engaged in polite conversation, forced laughter when required. The man she believed was her loving husband eventually reappeared, guiding that same mystery woman around the party, with a dazzling smile on his face. Veronica watched from a distance. Her mind spiraled, replaying his affectionate gaze, the gentle way he pressed a hand to the woman's back. The reality settled in Arthur Caldwell. Her beloved husband was having an affair right there in their home. The next morning, Veronica woke early, exhausted but resolute. She needed clarity, so she confronted Arthur the moment he walked into the breakfast lounge. He greeted her with a casual kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had happened. But Veronica could see the flicker of panic in his eyes when she slid her phone across the marble table, showing him a candid photo she'd managed to snap of him and his companion the night before. Arthur's expression froze, and for a moment his perpetual calm facade cracked. He tried to stammer out an excuse, something about a harmless flirtation, a misunderstanding, the woman being a potential investor. Veronica felt her stomach churn. She might have believed him once, but the way he'd held that stranger was anything but professional. Before Arthur could collect himself, she walked out. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on her shoulders, fueling her next step. Though Veronica had never considered divorce or anything drastic, she wasn't naive. Growing up with a single mother who struggled to make ends meet taught her one thing. Preparation was everything. She had a friend from college, Laura Singletary, who now worked as an associate at a prestigious law firm in Chicago. Veronica left the mansion and sped through winding roads until she reached Laura's office. Tearing up in the reception area, Veronica recounted the entire incident, from the moment she caught Arthur in the act to his feeble denials. Laura, always pragmatic and fiercely loyal, recommended they call in a top top-tier attorney, specializing in complex divorces and asset management. That was when Lisa Bloom's name came up. Realizing how complicated things might get, especially given Arthur's wealth and political connections, Veronica agreed. She wanted the best, and if it meant going toe-to-toe with her husband's empire, so be it. Within hours, Laura had arranged a meeting in Lisa Bloom's chic downtown office. Veronica sat in a plush leather chair, scanning the glossy photos of high-profile clients on the walls, feeling both intimidated and strangely emboldened. Lisa entered with a focused energy, wearing a smart black suit and practical heels. She listened intently as Veronica poured out her story. When Veronica finished, Lisa's eyes narrowed with professional determination. "We have options," she said firmly, detailing the potential legal strategies. Filing for divorce was straightforward. But if Arthur was indeed funneling money or shifting assets around, Veronica needed to act fast to ensure she got her fair share. You'd be surprised, Lisa warned, how many times wealthy spouses try to hide funds overseas or in obscure trusts once they suspect a breakup. Veronica's head swirled, but she knew one thing: she had to protect herself. With a deep breath, she agreed to proceed. On Lisa's advice, they decided to file a petition for divorce and a motion to freeze Arthur's assets immediately. Veronica wasn't out for revenge. At least that's what she told herself. But she'd poured her heart into the marriage, invested her life in supporting Arthur's philanthropic endeavors. She wasn't about to be left with nothing if he decided to vanish half his fortune before the ink on the divorce papers dried. The legal process began with a flurry of phone calls, paperwork, and discreet investigations into Arthur's financial dealings. Veronica felt both liberated and terrified. Each phone call with Lisa or Laura revealed more complexities: shell companies overseas, accounts, business partners who might not be entirely legitimate. She discovered that Arthur was far wealthier than she'd even realized. The sense of betrayal grew deeper. Not only had he been unfaithful, he'd also kept hidden parts of his life from her. The first real confrontation happened just 3 days after she filed. Veronica was alone in the Caldwell mansion, in the very study where she'd caught Arthur cheating. She was packing up some personal belongings when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Arthur appeared, face taut with anger, a crumpled envelope in his hand. "You served me divorce papers," he said, voice shaking with fury. Veronica tried to stand her ground, but fear twisted in her stomach. Arthur looked like a man pushed beyond his limits. "You cheated on me," she responded, her voice surprisingly steady. "There's no going back." Arthur launched into an elaborate denial, trying every angle, blame, begging threats. He claimed her lawsuit was a blatant money grab, accusing her of only wanting his fortune. Veronica's hands trembled, but her resolve remained firm. She walked out, letting his accusations echo unanswered behind her. News of the divorce filing spread through Chicago's high society in a matter of hours. Rumors swirled at country clubs, upscale boutiques, and charity luncheons. Veronica's phone buzzed non-stop with messages from so-called friends and acquaintances. Some offered fake sympathy fishing for juicy details. Others criticized her, whispering that she was a gold digger, trying to ruin poor Arthur Caldwell. Public opinion seemed divided. Arthur had a long-standing reputation as a philanthropic hero, especially for his donations to children's hospitals. Many found it hard to believe he could have engaged in an affair, let alone hidden a labyrinth of assets. Veronica's quiet heartbreak was overshadowed by the scandal of the lawsuit as tabloids and gossip columns exploded with sensational headlines. Millionaire mogul's marriage meltdown, Arthur Caldwell's dirty secrets. Veronica felt exposed, betrayed not just by Arthur, but by the so-called friends who relished in her downfall. In the midst of this media storm, Veronica found unexpected allies. One evening, she received a call from Deborah Knight, a long-time patron of the arts. Deborah and her husband had been close to Arthur and Veronica, but Deborah confessed that she had witnessed odd financial dealings over the years. She'd never said anything before, not wanting to stir the waters. Deborah offered to share what she knew about Arthur's suspicious transactions. Things like off-the-record property deals and shell corporations set up in the Caymans. "I'm not proud of staying silent," Deborah said, "but I'm willing to help if it means stopping him from hurting more people." Veronica felt a surge of gratitude, relieved that she wasn't alone. Perhaps she realized some in their circle were more than superficial partygoers. They were individuals of conscience, willing to support her in this legal and emotional minefield. Meanwhile, Arthur's legal team swung into action. They filed a countersuit, claiming Veronica had violated prenuptial agreements Veronica never even remembered signing. Supposedly, these documents limited her claim on his estate and required her to keep certain marital disputes private. Arthur's lawyers accused Veronica of defamation, insisting she had tarnished his public image by speaking to the press. The pressure was immense. Paparazzi camped outside Veronica's new apartment, in a modest downtown building, snapping photos whenever she left to meet Lisa Bloom. Journalists hounded her mother for interviews, digging into every aspect of her past. And swirling amid it all were questions about the mystery woman. Who was she, and what role did she play in Arthur's business? Empire Lisa advised Veronica to keep a low profile. But Veronica realized that the more she tried to hide, the more the tabloids conjured false narratives about her. As depositions and court hearings loomed, Veronica discovered a new layer of deceit. A friend with contacts in city government hinted that Arthur was planning to transfer significant capital to a secret bank account in Switzerland. Furious and frightened, Veronica relayed this information to Lisa. If that transfer happened before the asset freeze took effect, Veronica might lose the financial security she sought, making it nearly impossible to claim what was legally hers. Lisa moved swiftly, filing motions and lobbying the judge for an emergency hearing to freeze Arthur's assets immediately, citing the risk of asset dissipation. It was a bold move and an unprecedented one. In that jurisdiction, usually these matters took months to settle, and judges were reluctant to freeze someone's finances without irrefutable evidence. But the potential for fraud was too great to ignore. The showdown in court was set, and tensions soared to new heights. Standing outside the courthouse with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, Veronica felt her heart pounding like a bass drum. She spotted Arthur exiting his black luxury sedan across the street, flanked by his high-powered legal team. He offered the crowd a tight-lipped smile. The hearing room was surprisingly small, adorned with old wood paneling and a single American flag by the judge's bench. Veronica sat beside Lisa Bloom and Laura, her hands trembling beneath the table. Arthur's attorney, a seasoned litigator named Bradley Fisher, exuded confidence as he argued that there was no credible evidence Arthur was hiding assets. But Lisa had prepared meticulously. She presented emails from Deborah Knight referencing suspicious accounts, photographs of Arthur's confidential files, and even a recorded phone conversation provided anonymously that hinted at Arthur's intention to offload millions in real estate. The judge listened intently, scowling as he leafed through the documents. After 2 hours of tense testimony and fervent arguments, the judge leaned forward. He reprimanded Arthur's team for lack of transparency and expressed concern about the possibility of undisclosed financial maneuvers. Mr. Caldwell, the judge, intoned voice, echoing in the silent chamber. "The evidence is concerning. Therefore, pending further investigation, I'm granting the motion to temporarily freeze your primary liquid assets." A stunned hush fell over the courtroom. Veronica couldn't breathe. She glanced at Arthur, whose face blanched, eyes flashing with outrage. He whispered something to his attorney before storming out. In the hallway, reporters bombarded Veronica with questions. Though her heart hammered, she kept her statement brief. "I have confidence in our judicial system, and believe the truth will come out." The cameras captured her every word, broadcasting the image of a determined woman, refusing to back down against a powerful millionaire. That night, Veronica returned to her apartment and found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter from an anonymous source typed in neat block letters. It warned her of imminent threats, suggesting that Arthur might retaliate in ways beyond legal maneuvers. She felt her blood turn cold, recalling stories of wealthy tycoons who went to extreme lengths to preserve their fortunes. Terrified, she showed the letter to Lisa Bloom the next morning. Lisa looked alarmed. "I'll hire a private security consultant," she said. "This might just be a scare tactic, but we can't take any chances." Veronica reluctantly agreed. A small team of security professionals began monitoring her building's entrance, and she was advised to vary her driving routes. She felt like she was living in a crime thriller rather than a divorce dispute. But if Arthur was truly desperate, who knew what he might do next? In an effort to regain some normalcy, Veronica decided to pay a visit to her mother, Marianne Parker, back in Havenwood. She arrived in the sleepy town at dusk, seeking solace in the familiar. The small house with peeling white paint stood as a warm reminder of simpler days. Marianne opened the door with teary eyes and enveloped her daughter in a hug. Inside over cups of mint tea, Veronica confided everything about Arthur's affair, the lawsuit and the mounting threats. Marianne listened quietly. Sadness etched across her face. "I always felt there was something too perfect about Arthur," she admitted. "You deserved someone honest, someone who didn't hide behind a $1 million smile." Despite the comfort of her mother's presence, Veronica's mind couldn't rest. She knew she couldn't stay in Havenwood for long. Court dates and 1,000 unanswered questions awaited her back in the city. Returning to Chicago, Veronica discovered Arthur had unleashed a new wave of attacks. Publicly, he insisted Veronica was psychologically unstable, citing episodes from her past, a flat-out lie he'd likely fabricated. A swarm of reporters camped outside her apartment, speculating about her mental health. Friends called in confusion. Some even scolded her for dragging Arthur's name through the mud. Lisa Bloom arranged a press conference at her firm's office to set the record straight. Veronica, nerves on edge, stood before a sea of microphones and delivered a measured statement. "These allegations are false. I have never been diagnosed with any mental health condition, nor have I experienced episodes. I am simply standing up for my rights." She left immediately afterward, tears brimming. The cruelty of Arthur's campaign to discredit her felt like a second betrayal, compounding the heartbreak she'd already endured from his affair. Yet amidst the chaos, a breakthrough arrived. Laura Singletary had been quietly digging into Arthur's corporate records. Late one evening, she called Veronica, voice trembling with excitement. "I've found something big," she whispered. "Arthur's name is tied to shell companies that own multi-million-dollar condos in Dubai, plus a luxury yacht in Monaco, assets he never declared." Veronica's heart pounded. If this was true, it could strengthen her case immeasurably. The existence of hidden foreign properties would prove Arthur's efforts to conceal wealth. Laura promised to pass the information to Lisa Bloom so they could present it at the next hearing. That night, Veronica scarcely slept. Though the revelations were disturbing, they also gave her a spark of hope. Every new piece of evidence chipped away at Arthur's untouchable facade. Perhaps she wasn't fighting an impossible battle after all. Maybe, just maybe, truth would prevail. At the subsequent hearing, Lisa Bloom filed additional motions to freeze all international assets tied to Arthur Caldwell. Predictably, Arthur's team fought back, denying any wrongdoing. Bradley Fisher produced alleged independent audits, claiming no hidden holdings existed. But Lisa seized on Laura's evidence bank statements, property registrations, and even pictures of Arthur cruising on the very yacht he claimed he didn't own. The judge, now wary of Arthur's denials, allowed more time for forensic accountants to comb through the labyrinth of financial documents. He extended the asset freeze, broadening its scope to include any property or account where Arthur Caldwell was a beneficiary. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge spoke those words. Arthur looked like he'd swallowed glass. Outside, Veronica exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. With each legal victory, she felt the grip of Arthur's power loosening, though she knew the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Veronica wrestled with her emotions. The love she once felt for Arthur lingered like a phantom ache. She couldn't deny that they'd shared good times charity galas, where she felt proud of his generosity, heartfelt moments spent planning a future together, evenings gazing at the lake from their bedroom window. But that Arthur seemed like a distant memory now. The man threatening her in court, undermining her reputation, and brazenly lying about hidden assets was a stranger. She tried to remember when she'd first noticed cracks in their relationship. Maybe it was when he started taking more business trips without explanation, or when he began making grand promises but never followed through. Despite the pain, Veronica steeled herself. This was the path she'd chosen, and she would see it through. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, her self-respect. One afternoon, as Veronica reviewed documents in Lisa's office, a knock at the door startled them both. A young paralegal walked in, looking visibly shaken. "Mr. Caldwell's attorneys just served a subpoena for your personal diaries and journals," she said, handing over a stack of papers. Veronica felt her cheeks burn. She had never kept a detailed diary, but the attempt to pry into her private thoughts was alarming. Lisa read through the subpoena, her expression turning grim. "They're trying to build a narrative that you're emotionally unstable and vindictive," she explained. "We'll file a motion to quash this, but it's a reminder of how far Arthur is willing to go." A wave of indignation washed over Veronica. It wasn't enough for Arthur to cheat and lie. He wanted to scour her most personal moments, all for the sake of destroying her credibility in court. That evening, Veronica retreated to her apartment, bolting the door against the world. She sank onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow, feeling utterly drained. A year ago, her life was filled with optimism, plans for children, philanthropic projects, even the possibility of expanding their charitable foundation. Now she was mired in depositions, asset traces, and vicious public speculation. She closed her eyes, recalling the last words her mother spoke before she left Havenwood Hold. "Onto your truth, Veronica. People can spin lies all they want, but if you don't bend, they can't break you." She repeated those words like a mantra. Finally, summoning her courage, Veronica opened her laptop and typed out a statement of her own. She decided to speak directly to the press, carefully, and with Lisa's oversight. She would reveal the facts as she knew them. No embellishments, just the stark truth of Arthur Caldwell's betrayal. The next morning, Veronica's statement was published in several reputable outlets, including the Chicago Tribune. She wrote plainly about discovering Arthur's affair, about the suspicious financial behavior, and about her desire for a fair divorce settlement. Nothing more, nothing less. She didn't mention the intimidation tactics or the threatening letter. Instead, she let the evidence of hidden assets speak for itself. Almost immediately, social media lit up. To Veronica's relief, a growing number of voices expressed sympathy and support, condemning Arthur's actions. Over time, the narrative shifted slightly. People began to see beyond the tabloid's sensational headlines and question the philanthropic image Arthur had so carefully cultivated. Arthur's PR machine fired back, releasing a glossy interview in which he insisted he was the victim of a vindictive spouse. But for the first time, people seemed less inclined to believe him. As the divorce case neared its most critical stage, Veronica's nights were haunted by nightmares, Arthur towering over her gavel in hand, banishing her to a life of isolation and poverty. She'd wake in a cold sweat, gasping for air, only to find herself alone in her tiny apartment. Yet each day she donned her armor of resolve and faced new legal challenges. She sat through excruciating depositions, endured the scorn of Arthur's attorneys, and battled the relentless swirl of public gossip. Each time, Arthur tried to twist facts or smear her character. Lisa produced evidence that steadily eroded his defenses. Slowly, methodically, the puzzle pieces were coming together. The yacht in Monaco, the condos in Dubai, the secret Swiss account. Veronica could almost see the day she'd stand victorious in court, the day she'd reclaim her life and her pride. Then came an unexpected twist. A woman named Juliana Martinez reached out to Lisa's office claiming to be Arthur's former personal assistant. Nervous and hesitant, she confessed she had direct knowledge of Arthur's illicit dealings. Juliana said she could provide concrete proof emails, bank transfers, phone call recordings. But she was scared. Arthur had once threatened to ruin her career if she ever turned on him. Veronica and Lisa arranged a discreet meeting at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Juliana arrived looking over her shoulder as if she expected Arthur to materialize at any moment. She produced a folder stuffed with documents. "He made me sign NDAs," Juliana whispered. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Not after what he did to you." Flipping through the folder, Veronica's eyes widened at the incriminating details transfers from Arthur's main company to offshore accounts. This could be the smoking gun they needed. The next day, Lisa Bloom filed new motions with this fresh evidence. Arthur's attorney, Bradley Fisher, tried to dismiss Juliana's testimony as the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-employee. However, the authenticity of the documents was quickly verified by forensic experts. Suddenly, Arthur found himself cornered. As tensions mounted, rumors circulated that Arthur was considering an out-of-court settlement. He feared a lengthy trial would expose more of his secrets, tarnishing his carefully maintained image beyond repair. Yet Veronica couldn't shake the feeling that he was stalling, waiting for an opportunity to strike back or shift funds one last time. Lisa cautioned Veronica to stay alert. If Arthur decided to settle, it might come with conditions like strict confidentiality clauses. But Veronica was beyond caring about hush money. She wanted accountability. She was determined to stand her ground, no matter how fiercely Arthur fought to maintain control. The court date for the next major hearing arrived under the weight of an overcast sky. Veronica dressed in a simple navy suit, her hair pulled back neatly. As she entered the courthouse, she spotted a throng of reporters again. But she also saw familiar faces, friends like Deborah Knight and Laura Singletree, there to offer moral support. Even her mother was in the crowd, holding Veronica's hand briefly before she stepped into the hearing room. Arthur was already inside, pacing near the defense table. His skin looked pale, and his eyes brimmed with a jittery anger. When proceedings began, Lisa systematically presented the newly obtained documents from Juliana Martinez. The judge examined them, asked questions, listened to both sides. By midday, it was clear the court had seen enough to suspect significant financial impropriety. Arthur's team requested a recess to consult privately. The tension in the room was palpable. During the recess, Arthur surprised everyone by approaching Veronica in the hallway. He held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. "We don't need to fight like this," he said, voice low. "We can work out an arrangement." For a fleeting moment, Veronica glimpsed the Arthur she once knew, the caring philanthropist, the man who'd first swept her off her feet. But she also remembered his betrayal, the lies, the smear campaign, the hidden assets. She met his gaze. "We could have Arthur," she replied, "but you made it impossible." He swallowed hard and reached into his pocket, pulling out a handwritten note. "My settlement offer," he said, thrusting it at her. Veronica took it, scanning the figures. It was a substantial sum, enough to ensure she'd live comfortably for the rest of her life. But it came with a catch, a strict non-disclosure agreement about his affairs. Veronica's heart pounded as she read the terms. She could end this war now. No more court battles. No more invasive questions. No more paparazzi. But she'd have to bury the truth, pretend the affair, and the underhanded asset hiding never happened. She'd be free financially, but gagged morally. When she looked up, Arthur's expression was calm, almost smug. He assumed she would jump at the chance to walk away from the drama. She shook her head slowly, handing back the note. "I can't," she said. "I won't be silenced." Anger flared in his eyes. He snatched the paper and stormed off. Veronica watched him go, shaky but resolute. Perhaps turning down that money was foolish, but she realized something vital. She needed justice, not just a payout. She walked back into the courtroom, prepared for whatever was next. The hearing resumed, and the judge pressed both sides for clarity. Lisa Bloom reiterated the evidence, the affair, the financial duplicity, the intimidation attempts. Bradley Fisher tried to undermine Juliana Martinez's credibility, but each time Lisa countered with another piece of corroborating evidence. Eventually the judge announced his ruling on the temporary measures. The asset freeze would continue and expand to include any account or property discovered during the ongoing investigation. Moreover, the judge suggested that if further wrongdoing was uncovered, Arthur Caldwell could face criminal charges for fraud or perjury. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Arthur sat rigid, staring straight ahead. Veronica's pulse throbbed in her ears. She knew this was a monumental victory, yet it felt surreal. She'd gone from a naive event organizer to a woman standing on the verge of defeating one of the city's most influential figures. Outside, the press ambushed them again. Arthur rushed past, ignoring the barrage of questions. Veronica stood with Lisa Bloom at her side, delivering a concise statement. "I'm grateful the court has taken steps to protect my rights. The truth is what matters most here." She retreated to a nearby cafe, adrenaline still surging. Laura and Deborah joined her, exchanging hugs and tearful smiles. "You did it," Deborah said softly. "You really stood up to him." But Veronica couldn't bring herself to fully celebrate. The final trial was still ahead, and she knew Arthur wouldn't back down easily. There were still details to unearth, more secrets that could emerge. And beyond the legal struggle, she also had to heal personally from the betrayal, from the public scrutiny, from the collapse of the life she once believed was perfect. For now, though, she savored a small taste of triumph. Over the next few weeks, forensic accountants kept uncovering evidence of Arthur's deceptive practices. Each new revelation painted a damning portrait of a man willing to manipulate his philanthropy business ventures and personal relationships to maintain a veneer of respectability. Meanwhile, Arthur's legal team scrambled to discredit sources. They claimed that Juliana Martinez had been bribed, that Deborah Knight bore a personal grudge, that Veronica had orchestrated a grand scheme to frame Arthur. Yet none of these accusations held up under scrutiny. It was a media circus. Talk shows debated the scandal, with some hosts defending Arthur's philanthropic track record, while others condemned his apparent hypocrisy. Late-night comedians even made jokes about hidden yachts and questionable Swiss accounts. Veronica watched it all with a sense of detachment. Her pain was real, but it had become fodder for national entertainment, and she couldn't entirely escape that reality. Amid the legal wrangling, Veronica's personal life stood in shambles. She'd lost friends who sided with Arthur out of fear or loyalty. She avoided major social events, uncertain whether she'd face hostility or pity. The only bright spots were the unwavering support of her mother, Laura Deborah, and a handful of true friends who believed in her. During this time, she rekindled old passions, writing poetry, practicing yoga, volunteering at a local shelter. These small acts gave her a sense of purpose beyond the courtroom drama. She began to realize that she wasn't just fighting against Arthur. She was fighting to rediscover herself, her identity, after years of molding her life around his pursuits. One late evening, she penned a poem about resilience, tears slipping down her cheeks. Maybe she thought this heartbreak would be the crucible that forged a stronger version of herself. As the final trial date approached, Arthur made one last desperate move. His lawyers filed a motion to remove the presiding judge, alleging bias. They produced quotes from prior hearings, claiming the judge had shown a consistent prejudice against Arthur's wealth. The stunt caused a brief delay, but ultimately failed. The appellate court found no grounds for recusal. Yet the maneuver signaled just how far Arthur was willing to go. It fueled Veronica's anxiety, knowing he still had cards to play. She braced herself for the possibility that new damaging information about her might surface, though she couldn't imagine what else Arthur could concoct. And then, in a twist that surprised everyone, the identity of the mystery woman finally surfaced. A tabloid obtained photos of her with Arthur on a private jet. She was identified as Simone Duval, a high-powered consultant known for her ruthless business tactics. The saga deepened. Simone Duval, her name alone carried an aura of intrigue. Rumors about her influence on Arthur's finances spread like wildfire. Some said she was his silent partner, advising him on secret offshore investments. Others claimed she was the mastermind behind his entire operation. Veronica felt a strange mixture of relief and fury. At least now the woman had a name and face, dispelling the painful mystery. But the fact that Simone might have orchestrated Arthur's deceit made her betrayal even more palpable. Word reached Veronica that Simone was preparing to testify on Arthur's behalf, presumably to challenge the narrative around his finances. Lisa, however, wasn't fazed. "If they want to put her on the stand, that could backfire," she remarked. "We have more than enough evidence to contradict anything she says." Still, the thought of facing Simone in court filled Veronica with dread. She braced for yet another confrontation. The morning of the trial's opening arguments arrived in a blur of tension. Veronica had hardly slept the night before. She dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal grey suit and a simple pendant necklace her mother had given her years ago. It felt like armor, an emblem of her roots and the resilience she'd inherited. When she walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Journalists packed the gallery laptops open and cameras at the ready. Arthur sat at the defense table, stoic Simone Duval by his side, whispering to Bradley Fisher. She wore a power suit in deep burgundy, exuding confidence. Lisa Bloom began her opening statement with measured precision, outlining Arthur's pattern of financial deception, the evidence from Juliana Martinez, and the suspicious timeline of overseas transfers. She ended with a quiet but firm assertion. This case is about truth and ensuring that my client, Mrs. Caldwell, receives justice. Bradley Fisher responded by painting Arthur as a generous philanthropist, misunderstood and maligned by a vengeful spouse. He lambasted Veronica's aggressive tactics and accused her of orchestrating a smear campaign. Simone Duval nodded in agreement, occasionally whispering suggestions to the defense team. Witness testimonies followed. Deborah Knight took the stand describing the suspicious activity she'd witnessed. Juliana Martinez testified next, her voice trembling, but her story consistent and damning. She detailed how Simone Duval guided Arthur in transferring funds to obscure accounts. She even provided dates and account numbers. The defense tried to poke holes, questioning Juliana's credibility and highlighting her departure from Arthur's employment on strained terms. Yet each jab felt insufficient against the weight of the physical documents she provided. The tension was palpable as the gallery hung on every word, searching for cracks in the narratives. Then it was Simone Duval's turn to take the stand. The courtroom stilled as she stood up, every eye fixed on her striking figure. She wore a sleek burgundy pantsuit and a calm, collected expression, as though the entire proceeding was just another boardroom pitch. With practiced poise, she walked to the witness box and sat folding her hands in her lap. Her voice, when she began, was crisp, authoritative, and free of any trace of guilt. "I am a business consultant," Simone stated. "I was hired by Mr. Caldwell to advise on international expansion strategies. At no point did I assist him in hiding assets or in misleading anyone, including his wife." Lisa Bloom, seated beside Veronica, leaned forward slightly, noting Simone's deliberate choice of words. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just testimony. It was a performance. Simone continued denying all allegations. She dismissed the email referencing avoiding scrutiny as a misunderstood industry phrase. It referred to competitive market analysis, she claimed. Nothing to do with the divorce. Veronica sat motionless, eyes locked on Simone. Every denial felt like a slap. This was the woman who'd stood in their home, whispered in Arthur's ear, guided him through the maze of deceit. The audacity of her confident denials made Veronica's stomach churn. Lisa approached the podium for cross-examination. "Ms. Duval, let's go over the timeline," she began. Tone calm, but sharp. "You were in frequent communication with Mr. Caldwell in the weeks leading up to his wife's discovery of hidden assets." "Correct. Yes," Simone said. "We were working on a new investment vehicle in the Middle East." Lisa clicked her remote, and the courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying a series of emails, many of them between Simone and Arthur. The subject lines were technical, but one stood out: urgent trust structuring to shield holdings. "Care to explain this one?" Lisa asked. Simone shifted. It was a legal conversation around forming a trust to protect business interests. "Standard." Lisa's voice sharpened. "Standard? Then why does this email, dated 1 week after Mrs. Caldwell confronted her husband, mention the need to reroute investments before the asset freeze request goes through?" A murmur rippled through the gallery. Simone blinked rapidly, her composure visibly cracking for the first time. "I can't speak to Arthur's intentions," she said. "I just followed instructions. I wasn't aware of any legal filings." Lisa pressed further, presenting internal memos that included Simone's annotations, some even in her handwriting. One clearly read, "Move fast, no paper trail." Simone stammered. "These could have been misinterpreted," Lisa interrupted. "You're under oath, Ms. Duval." Silence hung heavy in the air. Simone's fingers tapped nervously on the wooden edge of the stand. Her earlier confidence dissolved into a growing unease. From her seat, Veronica saw the shift in the jury's expressions. Doubt had crept in. They were no longer seeing a sophisticated consultant. They were seeing someone implicated, someone with too much access, too much knowledge, and too many reasons to lie. Lisa concluded her cross with a piercing statement. "Ms. Duval, you didn't just consult, you conspired, and the evidence shows it." The judge called for a brief recess, allowing the courtroom to breathe. Simone stepped down, face pale, lips tightly pressed. Arthur avoided her gaze. Back at their table, Lisa turned to Veronica. "She's rattled, and that helps us. A lot." Veronica exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. For weeks, she had feared Simone's testimony would destroy her case. But now the cracks in Simone's mask were visible to everyone. The woman who had once operated from the shadows now found herself under the harshest light, and she was beginning to crumble. As the courtroom doors closed behind Simone, Veronica felt a subtle shift in momentum. The tide was turning. Truth, after months of suffocation, was finally clawing its way to the surface. The trial pressed on like a war of attrition. Every day in court felt like a battlefield. And on the final day of witness testimony, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken anticipation. Arthur Caldwell was called to the stand. He adjusted his tie with a measured calm, walking slowly to the witness box as cameras outside continued flashing through the courthouse windows. Dressed in a tailored grey suit, he wore the same carefully constructed expression of dignity he had worn at every gala and photo op for years. As he took the oath, his gaze drifted briefly toward Veronica. She didn't flinch. She'd spent months preparing for this moment. Arthur's attorney, Bradley Fisher, began the direct examination. His tone was sympathetic, almost theatrical. "Mr. Caldwell," he asked, "can you explain your business dealings that have been so harshly scrutinized in recent weeks?" Arthur spoke with the calculated grace of a politician. "I run a multifaceted business empire. It involves us in multiple countries, countless accounts, and teams of advisors. I never intended to hide anything from anyone, least of all my wife." He sighed dramatically. "If there were errors, they were administrative, not malicious. I trusted consultants like Simone Duval to handle financial logistics. I regret not monitoring everything more closely." To the untrained ear, he sounded credible, even remorseful. But Veronica saw the familiar flicker in his eyes, manipulation, wrapped in polished charm. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Lisa Bloom stood, her legal pad in hand, and walked toward the witness box. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, "do you deny threatening Juliana Martinez with professional retaliation if she exposed your financial arrangements?" Arthur stiffened. "Absolutely. I never threatened anyone." Lisa nodded, flipping through documents. "So this voicemail." She clicked a button on her laptop. "Isn't your voice." The courtroom filled with Arthur's unmistakable tone, harsh and low. "You don't want to make enemies out of people who pay your salary. Think about your future." Gasps broke out. Arthur's face turned a shade paler. "That was taken out of context," he stammered. Lisa didn't blink. "Was this also taken out of context?" She held up a printout of an email chain between Arthur and Simone, discussing offshore accounts. One line from Arthur read, "Move the money before she gets the courts involved." Arthur hesitated again. "I was referring to a business restructuring, not hiding funds from my wife." Lisa tilted her head. "And the timing one day, after Mrs. Caldwell confronted you about your affair. That's coincidence." The pressure mounted with every question. Arthur began to unravel, not dramatically, but in subtle, telling ways. He blinked more often. His answers came slower. He glanced toward Simone for reassurance, but she kept her eyes locked on the table. Lisa's final question silenced the room. "Mr. Caldwell, you've portrayed yourself as a victim of media attacks of betrayal by employees, even of your wife. But isn't the truth far simpler? You cheated. You lied. You hid millions. And now you're trying to rewrite the narrative because you got caught." Arthur's mouth opened, then closed. The room waited, but no defense came, not even from Bradley Fisher, who quietly shuffled his notes. As Lisa returned to her seat, she whispered to Veronica, "We just tipped the scale." Closing arguments followed swiftly. Lisa spoke with quiet confidence, weaving a clear and damning story from the months of evidence and testimony. "This is not about bitterness," she said. "It's about betrayal, about truth, about accountability." Bradley tried one last time to recast Arthur as a flawed but generous man. He invoked Arthur's charity work, his reputation, and even his emotional turmoil. But the energy in the room had shifted. Outside, reporters lined the courthouse steps. Arthur exited first, walking briskly past flashing cameras, face tight. Simone trailed behind him, stone-faced and silent. Veronica emerged moments later, flanked by Lisa and Laura. She didn't speak to reporters that day. She didn't have to, because by now, the world had started to see through Arthur Caldwell, and it was Veronica's truth they believed. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as everyone waited for the judge to return with his written decision. The tension in the air felt as thick as fog. Veronica sat in the front row, flanked by Lisa Bloom and Laura Singletary. Her hands were cold, despite the warmth of the courtroom clenched tightly in her lap. Across the room, Arthur sat rigid, jaw-clenched, Simone Duval by his side. Their polished exterior remained intact, but Veronica could see the stiffness in Arthur's movements, the subtle tells of a man expecting defeat. Rain trickled down the tall courtroom windows as the judge finally entered. The room fell into silence, broken only by the shuffling of papers and the occasional cough. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read from a printed sheet. After reviewing the substantial volume of evidence, including financial documents, email communications, testimony from key witnesses and cross-examinations presented by both parties, this court finds that Mr. Arthur Caldwell willfully concealed marital assets in an effort to deprive Mrs. Veronica Caldwell of her lawful share in divorce proceedings. A quiet gasp escaped from somewhere in the gallery. Veronica inhaled sharply, eyes locked on the judge as he continued. Furthermore, the court acknowledges a pattern of coercion, intimidation, and manipulation directed at Mrs. Caldwell and at third-party witnesses. These actions are incompatible with the obligations of good faith expected in legal proceedings. The judge paused, glanced over his reading glasses at Arthur, then continued. Accordingly, the court grants Mrs. Caldwell a divorce under terms favorable to her. She shall be awarded a comprehensive settlement that includes ownership of the couple's Chicago estate, a significant share of Mr. Caldwell's disclosed and undisclosed assets, as verified by forensic investigation, and continued protection under the asset freeze until all hidden accounts are accounted for. Arthur's eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a bitter line. Simone looked stunned, her face pale. The judge wasn't done. In addition, he said firmly, "This court is forwarding evidence of potential financial fraud and perjury to the state attorney's office for further investigation." That final sentence landed like a bomb. A ripple of shock spread across the room. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Arthur's posture collapsed ever so slightly, the image of power slipping away in real time. Veronica sat frozen, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, justice, vindication, and a strange, sudden weightlessness. After everything, the betrayal, the threats, the humiliations, she had won. Lisa leaned toward her and whispered, "We did it. And he's not just exposed, he's vulnerable." The judge concluded the hearing with a nod and a stern reminder for both parties to comply with post-trial reporting. Then he stood and left robe flowing behind him. As the room stirred to life, Arthur rose, muttering something to his attorney. He refused to look at Veronica. Simone followed him out like a shadow, no longer whispering instructions, no longer in control. Veronica remained seated a moment longer, soaking it all in. The cameras were already swarming outside, and she knew the questions would come. But this moment, this one right here, was hers. When she finally stood, Lisa and Laura embraced her tightly. "I feel like I can breathe again," Veronica whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Outside, the sky was still grey, but to her it looked brighter than it had in months. Reporters surged toward her, mics outstretched, but this time Veronica faced them without fear. She spoke clearly, calmly. "I'm grateful the court recognized the truth. This was never about vengeance, it was about justice, about refusing to be silenced." She didn't need to say more. Her poise, her strength, and the verdict said it all. That night, Veronica returned to her apartment, set down her keys, and looked out over the city lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. Not because she'd defeated Arthur, but because she'd reclaimed herself, her name, her story, her future. And this time, it belonged to her alone. Veronica's breath caught in her throat. She felt tears welling as relief, vindication, and overwhelming emotion washed over her. She turned to Lisa and Laura, embracing them, scarcely believing it was over. Arthur's face was a dark mask of fury. Simone stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Outside, reporters bombarded Veronica with questions, but for the first time she felt at peace facing their cameras. She spoke clearly. "I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. This wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness and dignity." That evening in the quiet of her apartment, Veronica allowed herself a moment to weep for the marriage she had lost, for the illusions that had shattered. Yet she also felt a new sense of freedom blossoming within her. A chapter of her life had closed, and though scarred, she emerged standing tall. In the end, Veronica Caldwell found more than just a legal victory. She reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her future. The court's ruling froze Arthur's elaborate web of secret holdings, forcing him to face the consequences of his betrayal. Though she lost friends and endured public scrutiny, Veronica discovered a newfound strength within herself. No longer defined by her husband's wealth or reputation, she stepped forward into a life shaped by her own choices. If this story captivated you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss more true-to-life drama and inspiring tales of resilience. Every click you make helps us continue bringing you stories of triumph, heartbreak, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, And stay tuned, or riveting narratives are just around the corner.